All right. Good morning, everyone. And thanks so much for joining us this morning, Merri. Today, we're joined with Merri Cronk, and she's excited to be here. We're excited to have you as well and kind of dive into things about your background. So, Merri, tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become a franchise consultant.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. And yes, I'm a franchise consultant and a franchisee with FranNet. A long time ago, I actually worked in a completely different space, and I went to a franchise consultant in my area. He happened to be with FranNet, and recognized that we had a lot of common things between us. And he was getting ready to retire, and he asked me if I'd be interested in taking over his business. And so that is something that I did at that point. And one of the big drivers for wanting to do this was simply just wanting to do something better for somebody else. I really felt like that was missing in my corporate career. Also knew I wasn't long for working in corporate America. It just really didn't fit me. Like many of my clients come to that realization as well. But what it's resulted in is about 22 years of experience in franchise consulting and franchise ownership for me.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, when you were originally in the corporate world of things, did you ever think that franchising was something that you wanted to do, or did you just kind of stumble upon it?
I was very blessed. My stepfather worked for the Small Business Administration, and he had heard me talking about my banging my head against the wall with things that I had to do in my corporate job. And he said, I really think you should come in and talk to this other gentleman. And so that kind of led me down the path. I had someone who was looking out for me, who was listening to me. So that really helped.
It's always nice to have someone in your back pocket, right? That's
Sure.
great. So, when it comes to working with clients as they're going through the process, what is your process for understanding their goals and their skills and their financial needs?
My process starts with education. I want people to understand what franchising is, frankly, who it fits and who it doesn't, how money is made and kept in business ownership, how to do proper due diligence, how to explore funding options. These are all things that I think people are thinking about up front and don't have a full grasp on. So I start there, and then if someone tells me they'd like my help, my goal is to really understand, their short-term, long-term goals personally and professionally, their leverageable skill sets to apply to the business. We work through their financial goals as well, short term, long term, growth and exit strategies, criteria for the business, things like how it should go to market and who the customers should be and who the employees should be, even structure and maturity of franchise systems in terms of their evolution and how it fits them. We work through budgets, one for what they live on as it's ramping up, the other for what they need to fund it. We start to identify funding options. And once I understand the whole target, the whole business model we've put together, then my expertise is bringing the franchises that may be a fit for them. And then they go through the due diligence process, and I coach and facilitate that. So, regularly working through things that are really good for them and working, and maybe things that aren't working or concerns that they have to help them kind of get to a decision one way or another. So that is how all of that works. That's my process. And I will say too that we have a profile that we use. There's actually some science behind what we do. So we look at things like attributes and values and strengths and weaknesses and how those things correlate back to motivation for different types of businesses. We look at leadership style, management ability, meta strategies. We also look at the financial picture of the client to make sure that we've hit things like minimum net worth and liquidity requirements as laid out by franchisors. We want to identify funding options. We want to build budgets. So it's a pretty comprehensive approach, and it's really kind of cool because it's all about the person first and then finding the business that can fit.
Oh, I really like that. So, when you go through all that work, I presume you must do some of that work when vetting out different franchises as well to bring to any of your clients. So, what does that look like from an evaluation standpoint when you're evaluating brands?
That's such a great question. So, I mentioned before that FriendNet itself is a franchise, so it's very familial. and we do a lot of work together. And a part of that, there's a bunch of us that actually identify and actually vet different franchisors to make sure that they have happy franchisees who are making money, who would choose that business again. They're properly trained, they're properly supported. So those are the companies that we pull into our fold. And so we don't, when we go through our own due diligence process, which is much like the one that we take our clients through, we don't always say yes to the franchise companies. We really want to make sure that we're working with companies who have, where their franchisees have really seen a lot of success and the franchisor is seeing success. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So now getting into a little bit more story time per se, walk me through when you had maybe a challenging client placement and how did you work through with that person to find them the best fit?
I will say that things are always less challenging with more education up front, right? So people who really understand what they're doing, people who spend the time in the due diligence have a lot less challenges. So we try to avoid that altogether. So,
Really, right?
sometimes things happen. Sometimes things happen. We try to avoid that. My job is to remove obstacles, right? And help people get more quickly to where they want to be. I can't think of anything that was just incredibly challenging that we didn't get through.
Yeah.
Um, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to
No,
answer.
that's okay. I mean, granted, it is a testament to the process that you have in place that you're not running into a lot of challenging client situations, and that's a good problem to have. Your clients, of course, love to work with you, which is great, and that shows. So, I guess another question in similar fashion would be, how do you tailor your approach to people that have different financial situations and different, backgrounds?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, really, the way I think about that is in two ways. One is we're looking at leverageable skill sets because we really want to make sure that that person has what's necessary to be successful in a particular franchise. And where I see the breaks are, I see the breaks a lot with sales and business development. If someone comes to me and they tell me they want a business to business type of opportunity, but they've only worked on the operations and management side and they've never handled business development, we may have a fundamental mismatch. So we've got to kind of work through those things and make sure that the franchisor has systems to help them get through the business development piece, or make sure that that's something that they can easily hire done and manage through. So, that's a big one. When it comes to budget, we always work within a comfortable budget for a person. That said, it's got to be a realistic budget too. I mean, we are getting into business, and the reason that people get into franchises is because they're buying processes, they're buying systems, and the ability of that franchisor to train and support that. So, to the extent that undercapitalization can be controlled, the franchisors, as I mentioned, have minimum net worth and liquidity
Mhm.
requirements, right? So then they, folks like Schoolie Mitchell tell us, that these are the things that we are looking for to make someone successful. So, the goal is, again, is to work through something that's really comfortable for them, very realistic. We know that they have funding options, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and it relates back to your initial comments about education. They
Mhm.
need to be educated on, of course, what's out there, but what's going to be the best for their financial needs too.
Mhm.
So important. So tell me about one of your clients that you were able to place with any sort of brand that they are now having success. And how proud does that make you feel?
Pretty amazing. I actually just had this the other day. This was so cool. So I was working with this couple that I had worked with about 2 years ago. And so the gentleman had just gotten, he had previously been an attorney. They had owned a business before. That's a little bit rare, but they had built it from scratch. And so they decided they didn't want to be in that business anymore. And he was looking for something else. And he had a very specific criteria. He had a health issue as well that was coming into play. I guess you could look at that as something that was a little difficult. We had to work around. But he ended up getting into a business that's very environmentally conscious, where people are actually making donations in bins. There's a fundraising element to that. There is a recycling element to it. It's a very cool business. So he and his wife came back to me a month ago and said, "Hey, we're ready for number two. We're ready for the next business." And so his wife was going to be kind of the head of it. Well, while we were talking, he was not able to participate in some of our meetings. So I said, "Hey, where's your husband?" And she said, "Oh, he had to go to the site because they are placing 52 bins. And that's a lot of bins. And it takes a lot of work, like a week's worth of work to put them on site. And they had gotten the second largest contract for in the franchisor's history for a specific school district where they were placing bins at every one of the schools. It was going to be a fundraising for the schools as well as recycling. So just a really, really cool thing to hear that he was
Oh,
having so much success and how large that was. And he even went in, he said, I had so much support coming from the franchisor to help us get to this point where we could do these deliveries, get all these things put in place. It was just amazing. So,
oh, that's a fantastic story. And that's something that you'll continue to talk about to the candidates that you're working with when introducing them to that specific brand too. Oh, that's so cool. And good for them. Congratulations to them. And franchising isn't always easy at times. Of course, there's some aspects that can be a little bit, but for the most part, it's some hard work that goes into it. And they've done just that. They followed the system, they've done the work, and the rewards are coming their way from that too.
for sure.
So, last question for you today, Merri. So, what do you find is the biggest misconception in franchising?
Oh gosh. We still get those calls, or we get internet leads or something where somebody comes and says, "Hey, I just want this next big food thing." All right. People still seem to think it's always food. And it is. There's a lot of
Yeah.
food. There's no doubt about it. But there are so many other options out there. There are options in retail and automotive and business to business and home and personal services. And so there's still a lot of things that people just don't recognize are franchises. And I think
Yeah.
the other big misconception is that it's really expensive to
Yeah.
get into franchises, and it's not. There's a whole host of opportunities that are very affordable. And another misconception I will say is that people think that even after paying royalties that they're not going to make money, and that just
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
No.
These franchisors would not be able to grow, and these franchisees would not be able to grow these large businesses. I had a client recently run into my husband and tell him that he had grown his business so large he was selling it to private equity. So really cool things happen. These
Yes.
businesses can be built very large. There's a lot of opportunity for great exits as well. So anyway, lots of cool things out there, and those are definitely misconceptions, and that's why we do the education up front.
Yeah. Education is key. Lifelong learning, right?
Mhm.
Good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Merri. I really appreciate it. And I've cherished our relationship over the years, and I look forward to continuing that as well. But thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.